What are we discussing on today's Locked on Diamondbacks podcast? D-backs used their 8-run 8th inning to fuel their series split against the Chicago Cubs and breaking down Corbin Burnes' debut against the New York Yankees.
You are Locked on Diamondbacks, your daily Arizona Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. You're listening to who? The always charismatic host of this podcast, Millard Thomas, multimedia journalist and I'm a graphic designer. So please go check out my website, millardthomas24.myportfolio.com. On there, you can see all my latest work, from my packages to my articles to my photos and my graphic design. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. On today's Locked on Diamondbacks podcast, we're going to be discussing the D-backs splitting their opening series against the Chicago Cubs, previewing Corbin Burnes' debut against the New York Yankees, and then discussing Brandon Pfaadt's extension and what it means for Arizona. So we got a jam-packed pod for you guys as always. And if you guys notice, for my listeners watching right now, we are live on YouTube. We typically don't do this. It's something I want to start doing in the regular season. So if you guys want these instant reactions right after the game, please drop a comment in the YouTube section below. But first, I want to say thank you for making Locked on Diamondbacks your first listen every day. I would not be able to do this podcast without you, my loyal listeners, sharing, subscribing, reviewing, doing all that so I could do this podcast for you. Thank you. It's free. It's available on all platforms. So please continue to tell your friends. And one of those platforms is something we're live on right now, YouTube. So please hit subscribe to Locked on Diamondbacks on YouTube. But now let's get into the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast. Let's discuss some baseball. D-backs opening series. They split against the Chicago Cubs thanks to a 8-run 8th inning. This was actually a fantastic comeback by Arizona because I think we all felt like the D-backs were on their way to being 1-3 in this series, right? The defense, the mental mistakes, some of the managing by Torey Lovullo. It just felt like It almost felt like we were back in 2024, the first half, because, of course, the Colorado Rockies series was really fun. But after that, the D-backs really struggled, and it was like they just weren't playing to their identity, right? When it comes to great defense and creating chaos and havoc on the bases. And D-backs didn't do that in the first, few series of 2024. And it seemed like the same thing was happening for the Chicago Cubs series because there were just so many mistakes. It's not typical of this Arizona Diamondbacks squad that has been so clean defensively and so good on the base paths, and they just weren't very tight. And it's something that they've been discussing, especially after that third game when you had that error late that costed us. The D-backs talked about tightening the ship. And for the most part, it did not seem like the ship was tightened at all in this series finale because there was still a lot of up and downs. When Eugenio and Jake McCarthy went up there in the 7th inning with bases loaded, Eugenio first, 1 out. He struck out, and then Jake McCarthy right after him, he gets out. It felt like that was the D-backs opportunity, and it felt like if the D-backs didn't come through there, they were going to lose the game and lose the series because right after that moment, Chicago Cubs come back and hit a couple bombs, and it's like, this thing's over. D-backs are going to be 1-3, and we're going to have tough conversations entering the New York Yankees series about what do we need to do to fix the mistakes that we're seeing. And instead, the D-backs had themselves a fantastic comeback in this 8th inning where everyone got to bat around. We even got to see Ryan Nelson be the first D-backs pitcher to get an RBI since Zach Gallen in 2021. And so this went from a miserable game where it felt like the D-backs were tracking to be 1-3 to a series split where you can now talk about, hey, we got some momentum going. Now we can have a conversation about not being like in last place in the NL West, not feeling like a Colorado Rockies team. And so this was a really good showing the last couple of games of the D-backs resiliency. I still think that's like the biggest factor that the D-backs have going for them going forward, and something that we saw a lot last year, right? The second half of the season, D-backs showed a lot of resilience for how bad they were in the first half. And also, if you look at the stats, D-backs were a super clutch team last year, right? Runners in scoring position. And also, when you look at their numbers late in games, high leverage situations, guys like Ketel Marte crushing it in the ninth inning. Like, this D-backs team since 2023, one of their calling cards has been being the comeback kid. It does not matter how many runs you're down late in the game. It always feels like this D-backs offense has a chance to get back. And we saw this team really struggle with runners in scoring position, but they still put themselves in position to win the game in game 3. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. And then this game, the 7th inning, they put themselves in position. It didn't happen. But then they come right back in the 8th inning and get the job done. This was another great showing of the D-backs resilience. And that's probably my biggest takeaway from this series is no matter how many runs this D-backs team is down, no matter how bad the offense or pitching might look through the first 5, 6, 7 innings of a ball game, in the 8th and 9th inning, you can't turn off a D-backs game. You have to watch until the very final pitch because you might miss something spectacular because the D-backs have an opportunity to come back in any game that they play. So this was a great series for the resilience factor of the D-backs, but we also can't overlook the sloppiness of this series. I love how the team responded late, but the defense was bad in this series. How many times was there a double play opportunity? We go back and look at that Brandon Pfaadt start. There was a couple opportunities where Pfaadt, a couple of people on, he got the ground ball he needed. D-back just too slow on the transfer to get the double play. We saw in that first game of the series, there was a couple times where D-back should have went to first instead of going to second base, and they weren't able to complete the double play as well. Feel like the defense wasn't that good in this series. The base running at times, of course, the Garrett Hampson play is the first one that sticks out in your mind when you think about that game 3. Also, can't forget Josh Naylor got thrown out at third base by an incredible throw by Pete Crow Armstrong. Like, the base running, the defense, and then also I think Torey Lovullo is getting too cute sometimes with this decision-making. I don't think anyone was a huge fan of the lineup we saw thrown out in this finale against the Chicago Cubs. And when you look at that finale, there was some gross negligence by Torey Lovullo. He's a good manager. He's had a good time and a good career with Arizona. It's been up and down, but he's taken us to the World Series. For the most part, he's probably like a top 10 manager in Major League Baseball. But I also can't help but feel like he hasn't gotten better as a manager over the last few years. I don't feel like he's improving because last year we saw a game where Torey Lovullo went through his whole bench, burned it all, and then in the 10th inning of a close game against the Atlanta Braves, we had Scott McGough coming up to hit with runners on. And of course, we lost that game because we were betting on Scott McGough. In the 8th inning of this game, when it's still close, you still need every run you could get. We were forced to play Ryan Nelson. Thankfully, Ryan Nelson came through. But again, how do you burn through the whole bench and end up in a situation where you have to hit your pitcher in the 8th inning of a close ball game? Just some gross negligence by Torey Lovullo where he has not learned his lesson at all, and he has to clean up those mistakes. As much as I like Torey Lovullo and think he's a good manager, I can't help but feel like at times he does hold back this D-back team with how he utilizes players in game, how he constructs his lineup. Like, obviously he knows way more about baseball than I do, but I can feel the frustration through D-backs fans. Like, why does Eugenio not hit higher when Alek Thomas is a hot bat? Why does he not play more? Why are we sitting guys like Corbin Carroll going to a rest day? Why is Moreno barely playing to start the season? Or at least, starting. Why is he not starting most of these games if you're going to bring him back later in the game anyway? Why are we even pinch running Gabriel Moreno, who's not slow at all? Like, I just think there's a lot of mistakes that this D-backs team can clean up. It feels very reminiscent to how we started last year. I do not like that at all. Makes me wonder, why does Torey Lovullo's teams come out the gate and just look sloppy, not prepared for the regular season? It's something the D-backs are going to need to clean up because next, we face the New York Yankees, who are like the hottest offense in Major League Baseball right now. And we'll preview Corbin Burnes' debut against the New York Yankees in segment number 2. But hey, if you're looking to place a little wagers down on a March Madness game, then the best place to do that is going to be FanDuel, because March Madness is here and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before.
Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. My favorite thing to do on FanDuel is the same game parlay. When I see the Phoenix Suns are playing, I'll take KD over on points. I'll take Booker over on points, and then give me the opponent's money line. I'm sorry, Suns fans, but that's what you got to do if you want to win some money. If you want to win some money, up to $200 of bonus bets, just put down $5, and if your bet wins, you get all that money in your pocket. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long.
Back here on the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast, and now let's discuss the turn through the rotation and preview Corbin Burnes' debut against the New York Yankees, because I do want to just talk about the pitching in general before we dive into Corbin Burnes, because I just want to talk about how each starter looked for the D-backs through their first turn of the rotation, because I think it was definitely up and down the rotation so far. I liked how Brandon Pfaadt looked in his start against the Chicago Cubs. I thought he should have maybe pitched longer in that game. I thought he should have went out there for the 7th inning. 6 innings, 78 pitches. Yes, he gave up the home run, which was like the only critical part of like that Brandon Pfaadt start that was kind of disappointing, because I felt like Brandon Pfaadt was cruising in that. I thought he looked really clean. I did not think the Cubs, like the balls are flying off the bat of the Cubs. Like I did not think it was like a ton of hard allowed contact. He made a mistake pitch on that home run by Shaw and by Kyle Tucker. But for the most part, I thought it was a very clean Brandon Pfaadt start, and I thought he was cruising in that game. I would have kept him out there for that 7th inning, because why not? If he's already efficient. Yes, he gave up the home run in the 5th inning, but I thought he went out there and looked really good again in the 6th inning. So I would have given him the ball again in the 7th. As soon as Brandon Pfaadt stops giving up these middle inning home runs, he's going to go to the next level as a pitcher, and we're going to discuss Brandon Pfaadt more in depthly in segment number 3 as we break down his contract extension. But I think through the first start, at least, Brandon Pfaadt looked really good, looked really comfortable, and definitely something to build off of. Again, if he can just limit those middle inning home runs, which just seems to be his kryptonite, Brandon Pfaadt's going to finish with a very good season for the Arizona Diamondbacks. I thought Merrill Kelly as well looked fantastic for Arizona. Yes, he gave up 4 walks, and he needed to settle down a little bit. Again, this was Kelly's first start since coming back from spring training, so he was a little bit rusty coming out the gates, had a few walks those first couple innings, gave up the run in the second. It was like, okay, is this going to be like a similar start to Zach Gallen, where you have to labor through the first few innings, walks allowed, and just like you never look comfortable? Thankfully for Merrill Kelly, that didn't happen. He really started to settle in, got into a little groove of the game, and still pitch into the 6th, 85 pitches. Yes, 4 walks, but only 3 hits allowed for Merrill Kelly. And again, Merrill Kelly is one of the most underrated pitchers in baseball. He looked good through his first turn through the rotation. Both him and Brandon Pfaadt, no concerns whatsoever so far. Erod today in this series finale, I thought looked really good as well. All these guys, yes, walks have been a little bit of a problem. We saw with Erod, home runs, also a little bit of a problem. He's the guy right now that has to really work on command, or his focus is command and location, because we saw today when Erod is hitting the corner of that strike zone, he looks nasty. He was doing a good job of keeping the Cubs hitters like off balance. I thought he did a great job with sequencing. I thought at times he was like pinpointing exactly where he wanted to pitch. But when he does make that mistake, it might only be like 92, 91 miles per hour over the middle of the zone, and it can be susceptible to hard contact. And so when Erod does make those mistake pitches, it does tend to be hard, loud contact every now and then. But for the most part, first turn through the rotation, considering where Erod was last year, because like we've been saying, Monty really overshadowed the season Erod had last year, because if there was no Monty on this D-backs team last year, we would be saying Erod was the biggest free agency bust of the offseason last year, and we would be like, oh my God, we sold this guy like $20 million a year for the next few seasons. And so I think the fact that he came out first start of the season and looked good, and it was something to build off of, That is a very positive factor, hitting like 93 on the radar gun. I think he still has potential to throw higher, or not higher, throw harder, get that velocity up as he gets a little bit healthier, builds up that arm strength. Again, 85 pitches through 5 1/3 innings pitch, just like Merrill Kelly. Like, all these guys were looking pretty efficient. Maybe the walks was the biggest issue for all these guys, but I thought everyone looked good for the most part, except for Zach Gallen, who was probably the most shaky out the rotation with his 4x4 performance, 4 hits, 4 earned runs, 4 walks, 4 strikeouts. But at the end of the day, am I that concerned with Zach Gallen? Maybe slightly, because I do think over the last couple of years, we have seen him become a little bit more, what's the best word? Up and down in nature. I want to find a more, like a higher vernacular word to say that. But he's been a little bit more inconsistent the last couple of years, right? Since that spectacular season where he had that scoreless streak, you could kind of look at his numbers and split his seasons into like 2 halves, where he has a good first half, maybe struggles in the second half, or vice versa. And I want to get back to that 2022 Zach Gallen, where he looked dominant over the course of a full season. I still have a lot of faith in him. The fact that we still have a rotation with Pfaadt, Erod, Kelly, Burnes, and Gallen is fantastic. Through the first turn of the rotation, everyone showed a little bit of rust. Everyone was a little bit shaky. Zach Gallen was probably the most shaky of all the starters, but did anyone have a blow-up start, or someone where you felt like you had to get Ryan Nelson in the 3rd inning because our starter was so bad? No. So I at least think through the first turn of the rotation, you could say positively there was no bad blow-up starts, despite Zach Gallen probably having the most shaky start out the rotation. But going to the next series against the New York Yankees, we're going to have to bring the pitching, and we're going to need Corbin Burnes to be spectacular in his debut against the New York Yankees. He was very good last year. 2 starts against the Yankees, 11 innings pitched, 3 earned runs, 15 strikeouts. But the reason why you have to be shut down pitching-wise against the Yankees is because their offense is on fire right now. I don't know if you guys have seen, but the Yankees have this new thing with their bats, which I really am invested in, and I want to see the stats and the data by the end of the season, because they were basically saying on the Yankees broadcast, they looked into the numbers of Anthony Volpe, and they were saying all the hard hits by Volpe last season was when the ball was hitting the label of his bat. So the Yankees this year took their bats and they said, let's put more wood in like that label area. That's why when we go look at the Yankees bats, go look at photos online, it looks so distorted, because they basically took, it's not like the bat is top heavy anymore. They moved a lot of that fat that used to be at the top of the bat more toward the middle, because they're saying a lot of times these guys hit the ball the hardest when the ball is hitting the label of the bat, which is a little bit lower. So let's put the wood closer to that area. And then all of a sudden we saw the Yankees hit like 12, 13 home runs in the last 2 games. And so I want to know, is this something that we're going to see more teams do over the course of a season? Like, if the Yankees hit 500 home runs this year, or the D-backs and every other team in baseball going to get new bats entering 2026? Is it something that baseball is going to be like, knock it off, this is illegal, you can't do that, no more juicing your bats or whatever? Like, I want to know how this affects baseball. We're going to see more teams do this if the stats come out like this is effective, or is baseball going to step in and say, you know what, this is too much of an advantage for the offense? Really curious to see. Curious to see how Corbin Burnes is going to do against that Yankee squad, because we know the highest paid pitcher now in D-backs franchise history. He's got a lot of pressure on his plate, and he's going to have to go out there and perform against a squad he should be a little familiar against. Pitching in the AL East last year for the Baltimore Orioles, definitely faced the New York Yankees a fair share of times and looked very good against them. So hopefully he can do it again. D-backs offense is going to need to step up to the plate to contend with that Yankees offense, which has been matching all season so far. And for me, I want to see Torey Lovullo rearrange his lineup a little bit, because we can't just keep putting Eugenio and Josh Naylor behind the Randalls and the Pavin Smiths and the Lourdes Gurriel. Despite Gurriel having that great game-tying home run today, he's been struggling so far this season. And if I told you, like, legitimately, if I told you the D-backs had prime Babe Ruth on this team, where do you think he would be hitting? Because right now the D-backs are hitting Eugenio 6, and going back to last season, I think I closed the tab unfortunately. Let me see if I could pull it back up real quick on our YouTube live stream. Because Eugenio, going back to last season, going back to July 1st of last year, let me see. I have it pulled up here. How many home runs does he have? Eugenio has 28 home runs in his last 81 games, entering the finale against the Chicago Cubs with like a 620 slugging, like insane numbers. And he's just been batting six, like not that important of a position in the lineup. Like, how is he batting six? How is he not batting fourth or fifth in this lineup or third? How is Josh Naylor not batting cleanup? Like, you love your first baseman batting cleanup. Josh Naylor looks so comfortable at the plate, such a good offensive player. And it's like, I just don't understand the lineup construction right now of Torey Lovullo, Gurriel, and Grichuk 3 and 4. Like, I like both of those guys, but they feel like swing pieces in like the 6th, 7th spot in your lineup, right? Gurriel's a streaky hitter. He's not a guy that's consistent game to game, despite his average always finishing like pretty high. He's a guy that one month he looks fantastic, and then another month he goes cold. And I feel like a guy like that should be like your 7th inning guy. Not your 7th inning guy, your 7th guy in your lineup as someone that's like a major swing piece streak hitter. I would love him there. Bad Eugenio higher in the lineup. Bad Josh Naylor in the lineup. Personally, it sounds kind of crazy. I would go Carol Marte, depending on who the pitcher is. And then I want to see like Geraldo Perdomo bat third for the D-back team. Last year, the numbers around Major League Baseball told you the guy batting third on your lineup kind of got like the worst opportunities out there. Well, Perdomo's the kind of guy, if you think about the TV show Chopped, it doesn't matter what ingredients he gets. He can make a Michelin dish out of gummy bears and seagrass and kale. And so if Perdomo batted third for this team, I think it could play perfectly. Like if Carol Marte got out and then Perdomo came up, he did his little plate discipline thing, hit a double. Now you got Eugenio and Josh Naylor coming up after him to keep the inning alive. I love the idea of Perdomo batting third. I don't think it would ever happen, but can we at least start with Eugenio and Josh Naylor hitting higher in the lineup? First, you got to do Eugenio because he's legitimately been Babe Ruth for a half season now worth of games, and it's insane that that guy's batting six. So going against this next series against the New York Yankees, who have been mashing it, let's reconfigure this lineup a little bit so we can match the offense of the New York Yankees. D-backs continue to lock up their young core. We'll discuss what the Brandon Pfaadt extension means next.
Get the supplies you need from the site made for the skilled trades, Supply House. Whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of 200,000 parts from 400 top brands, you'll find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person. And for trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage. Now it's your turn. Join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use promo code SHF for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com.
Back here on the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast, I accidentally went off my tab for a second. Sorry about that. If you guys saw a blank screen, I don't know what just happened. I accidentally hit backspace. I guess that's what happens when you're doing YouTube live. But let's get back to the podcast. Let's discuss the Brandon Pfaadt extension because this was huge news that the D-backs dropped over the weekend. They announced another extension for their young core. This time it was Brandon Pfaadt. 5 years, $45 million, $21 million club option, and then a mutual option on the back end of the deal. Just another fantastic job of this D-backs team, building this team smart and locking in the core pieces. What the D-backs are doing right now is very reminiscent and comparable to what the Atlanta Braves have done the last few years when it comes to locking up your young stars, because if you do it early, you can get these guys on bargains where they can be fantastic players that are actually on deals where it's like, wait, our guy's only making that much and he's producing on this level? You look at a guy like Ketel Marte, who finished, as a not runner-up, as an MVP finalist last year, should have been a runner-up. Don't get me started on that. Ketel Marte, compared to the other players in Major League Baseball who put up the stats that he does, he's making $19.6 million this year, but then it goes to 16.6, 14.6. Like the idea of a MVP finalist making like around 17 million a year over the next 3 seasons is absolutely insane. This is what the D-backs have been doing. That's been so smart. They've been locking up their guys young, locking them up early, and then these guys have been outproducing their contracts. Look at a guy like Corbin Carroll. Same thing with him, right? They gave him like an 8-year, $100-something million contract that ages just absolutely perfectly. He's going to be like 30, 31 when he's a free agent. And you look at the Corbin Carroll deal for the next like 4 seasons, he's only making like 10 million a year, 12 million a year, which is crazy. The last 2 years of the deal are absolutely backloaded, 28 million. But if he's 29 years old and he looks like a top 5 player in baseball, like $28 million for that guy is going to be a bargain. When a guy like Xander Bogaerts is making 26, a guy like Manny Machado is going to be 37, making like 40 million a year. Like Corbin Carroll making 28, it's going to feel like an absolute bargain. And this is something the D-backs have been doing all offseason, which is just so smart. Lock in the core that you have, lock in the guys you believe are part of your future. That's what they've been doing. And it's been with Brandon Pfaadt. We saw them with Geraldo Perdomo, 25 years old, gave him an extension as well. And you go through this D-backs team right now, and it's like, we have a lot of guys who are good that are going to be locked up for the next few seasons. Corbin Burnes, of course, going to be making $30 million a year for the next few years, but he does have a player option for 2027 that he could opt out of if he wants to. Erod will be here for the next few years. Brandon Pfaadt, I mean, when we look at the numbers, he's going to be making like $8 million a year the next 4 years, and then it goes to that $20 million club option. But at that point, he's like 30 years old, and the D-backs can decide if they want to pay him $20 million. And if he's good enough to earn $20 million, that's great for both sides. So your rotation, at least at the minimum, is going to be Burnes, Erod, and Pfaadt probably for the next 3 or 4 seasons. You got Justin Martinez locked up. You got Geraldo Perdomo locked up. Corbin Carroll, Ketel Marte, like a lot of your core players are locked up. I think up next, after seeing the D-backs extensions, you have to assume a guy like Gabriel Moreno has to be calling Mike Hazen and be like, yo, Mikey boy, where is my extension at? And I think it's going to come at some point this year, maybe not in the middle of the season, but I think by next offseason, I think by the start of the 2026 season, Gabriel Moreno will have himself a new deal, especially because we all believe Moreno is going to have a big impact season offensively. He's already been great defensively, but I think this is going to be the first year Moreno takes that leap as an offense player. We saw him so far this series. He's looked very good for Arizona. He's come out the gates. He's looked pretty good at the plate so far. Despite not even playing every single game, he came into the game today off the bench, 2 hits and an RBI, super clutch in this D-backs comeback victory. Like, we feel so good about Moreno, and I feel like he's going to be next up in line to get an extension from Arizona. And so everything that the D-backs are doing right now, they become the model franchise in Major League Baseball. They don't have the major TV deal like the LA Dodgers or the New York Yankees, where their payroll can just be supplemented by their TV money. The D-backs are not like that. They have to draft well. They have to develop their talent. They have to make smart trade acquisitions. They have to know who they want to get in free agency, because unlike the Dodgers, the Mets, or Yankees, they can't sign everyone. You can get a Corbin Burnes and make him your highest paid player in franchise history, but you could typically only get one of those in a free agency. You can't go out there and sign every guy to a max deal. The Dodgers could go out there and spend $2 billion in one free agency, but the D-backs, they can get one elite guy in free agency and then have to supplement it with some other parts. And so this has been a great job of team building, roster construction by Mike Hazen the last few years. I think the D-backs have become the model franchise in Major League Baseball on how to build a contender with big market teams in your division. So I hope other teams take notes, because when we talk about what's wrong with baseball and it's like, oh, the Dodgers are baseball's biggest problem. No, I do think we need some rules in place for when it comes to the deferrals of money, right? You can't defer $700 million. And maybe they shouldn't be a pipeline for the best stars from Japan. But in terms of like the Dodgers spending $2 billion in an offseason, like that doesn't bother me at all. I don't care that the Dodgers are aggressive and are like in the mix for every star player. My problem is there are not other teams who are as aggressive as the Dodgers. And to be honest, you don't need to be as aggressive as the Dodgers. You just need to be as aggressive as the D-backs, who don't sit on their hands in free agency, who still go out there, pick up the phone, and try to add to their roster. Feels like there's so many other franchises who just claim, oh, we're a small market team, we can go out there and compete with the big dogs. Yes, you can, if you have a commitment from your owner to spend money. If you have a GM who knows how to build up your roster, you can compete with anybody in Major League Baseball, and that's what the D-backs have showed the last couple years. That's why the D-backs have become the model franchise in Major League Baseball. Now, that's it for this edition of the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. If you liked us going live on YouTube after the D-backs game, please drop a comment in the YouTube comment section if you want me to do more of these going forward in the future. And as always, stay safe, stay healthy. Doses.